Motion be agreed to. The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it was a full and comprehensive speech by the Minister there, and I think she summarised, and she summarised the main points of the bill as brought back to the House. I also want to thank the Select Committee, Mr Speaker, because in my reading of it, they've made a couple of changes here, fundamental changes that have made a huge difference to the bill. And I have to say that the bill that I made a brief speech on as it came through the House the first time hadn't been properly scrutinised. I think we underestimated what they were trying to do or what was possible from the bill. And I have to say, in the end, it was kind of a classic Tory piece of legislation, really, when on one hand, they'd omitted the obligation, the legal obligation for MAF in collecting information to transfer it back to customs. And they said that the objective of the whole bill was coordination, collaboration and more effective border management. Well, if you leave out something so basic as that, it begs the question, how good were they when they originally drafted, or what was the intention? The other thing that was included in the bill, Mr Speaker, and the Select Committee have astutely changed, were the provisions around information and information sharing. And what Auckland International Airport did was expose themselves completely at the Select Committee. Because if there's one organisation that is an absolute monopoly, that have abused that monopoly position time and time again, and quite frankly, there doesn't seem to be any hope of anyone pulling them under control, it's Auckland International Airport. Almost 80% of the people coming into this country, that's right, ask Air New Zealand what they think of Auckland International Airport. Yeah, that's right. Well, Auckland International Airport said that they wanted the information from people coming in on the planes because they wanted to share that with the retailers. The retailers. And the retailers, of course, are a tightly controlled bunch at the Auckland International Airport because it is the biggest rort in the country, Mr Speaker, the way it's set up. And good luck to them, but most would say under the Commerce Act and under the current arrangements in New Zealand, that's a bit of a rort. Well, you have to walk through. In fact, it's almost impossible to get in and out of customs in New Zealand now without knocking over at least 10 bottles of gin, a carton of cigarettes and all the perfume, because you are forced to go through retail. And, Mr Speaker, to be fair, it's a model used around the rest of the world, but, you know, we seem to be copying all the worst things. Anyway, the point being is that this information, rather than being gathered for biosecurity reasons, thank God I'm deaf and I can't hear Paul Quinn, and rather than being gathered for true border security reasons, the priority was going to be that it be passed back to the retailers, Auckland International Airport, so they could make more bucks from it, Mr Speaker. The committee, the Select Committee, that member over there, I don't know whether he was on it or not, probably not, because they made a good decision here. That committee astutely said that's going beyond the pale. That is going too far, Mr Speaker, and the objective of this piece of legislation to gather information is so that we should improve the border management system in this country, not to improve the retail sales of Auckland International Airport. It is still possible. It's still possible to happen if the Minister undertakes an extensive consultation process. At least the safeguards are there, and it's not the quick fix solution that could have been possible, Mr Speaker, had the bill passed through the system without amendment. There are a couple of good things in the bill here, Mr Speaker, and one of them around biofuels. The definition of biofuels, which was unclear for some people, fuel manufacturers, and the fact that now people, if they are as innovative as we hope they will be in the future, producing their own biofuels for their own use, they don't get caught up paying the excise on that. And that is a very good incentive. The question that, and not being on the committee, and I'd like someone perhaps to answer it, did that exemption or did consideration of that exemption go to individual farmers who, in my view, in the very near future, will be through biodigesters producing their own biofuel to run their farming operations. There is a pig farmer in the country doing it now, but there'll be dairy farmers doing it in the very near future. And the question is, should the government or did the Select Committee consider whether they too should have an exemption from the excise? I personally would support it. I think we would support that, because that really does start to make smart use of methane that otherwise would be expelled into the atmosphere, at biodiesel, you name it. And there will be smart farmers within 5 years, Mr. Speaker, who will be completely self-sufficient in energy production and utilisation, I say, because the farmers do have the ability to do that if they're given the right incentives. The Select Committee, in its wisdom, saw that incentives should be in place for domestic users and producers. They should have perhaps gone that one step further, although perhaps they had a directive from their minister, him or herself. Mr. Speaker, as I say, bringing some coordination at the border is something that the next speaker from our part, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, actually initiated while she was minister. And I have to say I'm privileged to be able to speak before her. She will have a far more interesting and informative speech than mine. A couple of key points I thought I should make. But she was the minister when these things were initiated. And I'm sure she's pleased to be able to speak on this bill. Coordination, collaboration is a must, Mr. Speaker, in terms of joint border systems. I suspect that one of the things that might emerge from this down in the not-too-distant future is perhaps payment by the tourism industry for some of the joint border management systems. Indeed, it shouldn't be forgotten that the previous national government attempted to implement a border charge, failed because they didn't conduct a proper consultation, and I put on record my assertion that the national government will put the proposal up in the very near future that the tourism industry should indeed pay part of the joint management. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate, Mr. Speaker, here, but they should be ready for that coming down the track. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to say too much more other than we do support the bill back into the House, Mr. Speaker. It is progress. It does allow for better technology, better coordination of the joint border agencies, and we shouldn't forget that there are a number of them, Mr. Speaker. It's just saying MAF, who run, of course, Biosecurity New Zealand. We've got AVSEC, who run the security side of it. We've got Customs, Police and Immigration. And the coordination has not always been what it should be. This will ensure that information is passed between them, and with the amendment that the Select Committee brought into place, does actually ensure that information that MAF get does go back to Customs. A more than minor omission, I would say, in the original drafting of the bill, and I congratulate the Select Committee for doing that. And as I say, I can't help but applaud the committee for providing better incentives for biofuel production. Mr. Speaker, there are a whole list of little things that the bill also does. I'm not going to run through them all, other than to say that Labor welcome this bill back into the House.